So last week we did touch on religion, but we kind of got lost in the weeds there, focusing on a specific religion. Yeah, and we're not really going to be talking about education. I think we've kind of hammered that point home and kind of beat that horse till it was dead, and then kept beating it.
Yeah.
Installer failed. Awesome.
Actually,
that's a message that pop up.
If I could mention something very quickly.
Go for it.
I missed last week's stream. That was when you guys were talking about religion and education, right?
Yeah, and this time we're focusing on religion.
That was the goal, but we didn't really talk much on the education itself. But
okay.
I did want to ask you, so when you were homeschooled, was there a religious element to it?
There definitely was.
Was there a religion for it? Oh, there was. Okay.
And please, nobody chastise my parents for this, but I was raised with watching Kent Hovind.
I don't know who that is. I can't chastise.
I do know who that is. Not the worst, but not the best.
Yeah. I don't think he's as bad as Kent Ham, because at least Kent Hovind is funny, but they're kind of the same as far as simplicity. Like Kent Hovind, I recall during his creation seminar videos, he goes talking about how atheism is basically the root of fascism, communism, and all the other types of evil isms out there in the world. And really, that's just an simplification of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's getting more and more on the internet. I'm thinking to myself, come on, Kent. You're funny, but come on.
That's painting with a very painting with a very broad stroke with that brush. I mean, with atheism, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe there's some evil people in history that were atheists, but I don't really buy that one could tie their atheism to their evil shit. I
actually would.
I mean,
oh boy, here we go.
I mean,
this was actually the fear of Nietzsche. That this was what he said. We have killed God, and there's no amount of water, or there's no amount of water that can wash the blood from our hands. This was what he was lamenting with the scientific community's insistence that, hey, we figured all this stuff out, therefore there is no God. And it created this vacuum, this power vacuum, because at that time, morality was almost entirely based upon religion. There was very few moral systems that didn't involve some kind of religion, some kind of deity, some kind of God. And when evolution and heliocentrism and all of these scientific understandings all linked together, and we're like, oh, well, then we don't need a God. And Nietzsche's like, are you guys okay? We've killed God, and now there's this huge power vacuum. You've just destroyed our moral foundation. And there's nothing to replace it. There's no system. Atheism offers no system for morality. And in that instance, we have people, and I guess this is, we are going to be talking about this on Sunday. I have a debate. S-Man offered to host the debate between me and Colt of Ham, so we're going to have round 2. And I don't anticipate it going well for him.
You two fuck each other already. Come on.
We are going to be talking about objective morality versus subjective morality, and I'm of the position that it cannot be subjective, because that makes morality useless. And this is what I see when you're talking about atheism versus deism or theism, is that without some kind of central authority for morality, without some kind of objective morality, it's really difficult to come to a moral consensus from an atheistic point of view, because from what a lot of you have said is that morality is subjective, and if morality is subjective, then anything goes, and that's what I kept trying to reinstitute over and over again, and that's what I think results in things like communism and all of these massive genocides and atrocities, is not so much atheism in and of itself, but the fact that it doesn't have a moral structure, and without a consistent moral structure, you get these atrocities.
Well,
that's my point of view.
if I can like play devil's advocate here, no pun intended, by the way, son of Lucifer. People can like twist verses in the Bible to fit their own ideas.
Oh, yeah.
Like there are plenty who have twisted the verses in the Bible. I mean, yeah, they may well be unjustified in their twisting and in their interpretations of the Bible, but there are people who have and interpreted it to be a pro-slavery book.
Yeah, but my perspective.
What is that wiring sound in the background, by the way?
I am not. Is that? Whose is that? Is that on my end or is that somebody else? There's like a slight buzzing and it just kind of started recently. Is that? Okay, everybody mute themselves and we'll see if that's just me or doesn't seem to be Zach because he just muted himself. Hang on a second. Let me. Okay, I think it was S-Man. So they checked something on your end. There was that buzz. Yeah, and it's back whenever you unmute.
Whose vibrator is that?
Yeah.
What?
S-Man is
What did Brandon say?
He said, "Whose vibrator is that?" So S-Man is having a little fun off camera. All right, so yes, that is a legitimate concern, but this is the same instance when people talk about Islam versus Christianity. And people will point out, oh, well, there's people who do, there's a Westboro Baptist who do things in the name of Christianity, and I would argue that that's the exact opposite of what Christians are supposed to do, is everything they're doing is like, no, that's the exact opposite of what Jesus would do. But then you look at the religion of Islam, and I would say it's very hard to be a good Muslim without doing some of the things that ISIS and Hezbollah and all of these terrorist groups advocate, because that's actually a central part of their doctrine. So, and while you could say that people have done terrible and atrocious things in the name of Christianity, and many people would say that the Holocaust was due to Christianity or the Catholic Church, and they're like, oh, the Jews killed Jesus, and so that is a highly contentious point of view. But I would say, from my perspective, Christianity had nothing to do with the Nazi regime, and the assault against the Jews wasn't because they killed Jesus, although they might have used that excuse. The main reason is that the Jews held most of the banks, and the banks were the ones foreclosing on all of the German homes. And so they're like, hey, the bank, the evil Jews control all the money, and they're taking away our livelihoods, they're taking away our property, and that's why they hated the Jews. It wasn't because of, oh, they killed Jesus. No, they may have used that as an excuse, but the main reason everybody was rallying behind the Socialist Party to begin with is they viewed the Jews as taking away all of their stuff. And kind of sort of they were, because they were the bankers, and when you can't pay your rent, the bank takes your house.
I gotta ask, when was it that Hitler, I mean, if this is the case, when is it that Hitler, if at all, claimed that we're holocausting the Jews because they killed Jesus?
No, I don't think that ever came out, but that's what I've heard that argument from other people when talking about Hitler, and they're like, oh, you can't say that the Nazis were an atheist organization because, Hitler was a Catholic and he was killing Jews. So I've heard that argument from others. I don't think that argument holds water. And like you were saying, where has Hitler ever said that? As far as I know, there's no recording of him, or there's no writing, there's no propaganda of any sort of him making that particular statement, or that being an official statement of the Nazi Party. Some people have attributed that to Hitler's motivation. And what is going on with S-Man? He had a pages of code, or you're doing a Google search, right? I kind of got sidetracked by that, but the point I was making is that yes, Christianity has been used. There's lots of people who would killed in the name of Christianity, but that isn't a core tenet, and that's actually contradictory to the actual worldview of what should be a true Christian. But when you're looking at atheism, there is no core atheist doctrine. Atheism is just, there is absolutely no God. There is nothing else. There's no value system. There's nothing else associated with that. It's just this isn't real. And because of that, anything that, let's see, there is no way to do something right in a system like that. I mean, killing someone or murdering someone is not against the tenets of atheism. Letting someone live is not against the tenets of atheism. Atheism is neutral on that. And that for me creates societies where you see these kinds of things, where people have a apathetic viewpoint about those sorts of things. Like, people can do terrible and horrendous things, and they're like, well, it's not against my, I mean, why should I view this as a negative thing to do? What is your reasoning behind why it's wrong to kill millions of people? Like, with a religion, you're like, well, it's because it's against our religion, or it's against our moral system. While I'm not saying that people who are atheist can't be moral, I'm saying they don't have the foundation for their morality. So Christians can be just as amoral or immoral as people who are atheist, but at least they have a foundation for morals to rest upon. That's the issue that I'm seeing, is religion is setting morals on a strong foundation of a rock, and atheism is setting morals upon shifting sand. That's a biblical analogy. You know, the wise man built his house upon a rock, and the foolish man built his house upon the sand. That's to me what I see, is atheism can have morals, but their morals are built upon a shifting foundation. So what good is they could have the most stable moral system ever imagined, and it wouldn't mean anything because the foundation upon which it rests is unstable. So that, you know, even if it's a solid block of morality, as the ground underneath it shifts, so too will that morality shift and move around, and so it may stay intact. But you're going to have all kinds of upsets and all kinds of areas where it gets ignored, or it could fall through completely and disappear. That is the problem with not having a secure foundation. I mean, yeah, I've gone on a big rant. Anybody else want to add their thoughts?
Yeah, just very quickly, I want to read something from the Jewish Virtual Library.org is the website. The Holocaust, non-Jewish victims, and in it they include like Jehovah's Witnesses were persecuted by the Nazis. He also says other groups singled out by the Nazis included LGBTQ individuals, the physically and mentally disabled, Roma, being gypsies, Poles and other Slavic peoples, Jehovah's Witnesses, and members of political opposition groups.
Does it also mention African Americans? Because there was a pretty big. The population. I get the population of African Americans in Germany and in the areas they took over was fairly minimal, but they still seem to treat them like property and like lesser beings, and that seemed to be, because they weren't the master race or whatever, and yet for some reason, what was his name? Is it Himmler who performed the scientific experiments where he had African women trying to mate with gorillas and stuff like that? Maybe it was Himmler, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was somebody else. But there's lots of weird, crazy, from a subjective morality and from an atheistic point of view, I don't see how you can condemn those types of actions, because atheists, and I would like to get more responses from atheists. If you're trying to talk, S-Man, we can't hear you, so maybe check your mic or something, because I'm still getting a slight buzzing from you, and you haven't said anything in a while. But I would like to get something from perspective from someone who isn't religious, when they're saying science seems to be the justification for denying the existence of God, right? That seems to be your perspective: is science this, science this, science disproves God, and science is something we should all rely on because it is objective and we can all verify and validate that. Well, from a scientific perspective, there should be no reason not to have an experiment where you try to mate a gorilla with a human to see if, if something actually can result from that. What justification would you have to prevent that type of experiment? That's my position. I mean,
yeah, S-Man.
So I think he's trying to respond, but his mic maybe.
Yeah, S-Man, we're getting nothing. We're getting absolutely nothing but static. You might want to try
Can you hear us? Type in the chat if you can hear us. Actually, maybe we should type that in the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like he was trying to talk, but.
You said yes to the question. Still nothing but static, S-Man. Still nothing but static and buzzing. And actually, very quickly, something that I want to bring up, also from the same website, JewishVirtualLibrary.org. Priests and pastors died for their beliefs. Hitler wanted not only to conquer all of Europe, but Hitler also wanted to replace a new religion, but Hitler also wanted to create a new religion and to replace Jesus Christ as a person to be worshipped. Hitler expected his followers to worship the Nazi ideology. Worship the Nazi ideology. Since Catholic priests and influential leaders in their community, they were sought out by the Nazis very early. Thousands of Catholic priests and Christian pastors were forced into concentration camps. A special barracks was set up at Dachau, D-A-C-H-A-U.
Yeah.
I do not know how you would pronounce that.
Yeah,
the camp near Munich, Germany, for clergymen. A few survived, some were executed, but most were allowed to die slowly of starvation or disease. So I'm not just going off by that line. I find it kind of hard to believe that Hitler might have been a Christian. I mean, he might have been like a theist of some sort, trying to create his own religion or something, and not an atheist. But anybody who says that he's a Christian, I find that very hard to believe, going off by some of this information.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Okay.
All right,
we've covered a lot, so we'll let you go off.
Yeah, to respond to what you said on, I don't think I ever actually said that, or at least I can't remember if I actually at one point said, I think I actually said there's nothing to prove, there's no evidence to prove that God exists, or that we go to heaven after we die. I don't think I actually, I think that's more what I actually said instead. And Zach and I saw your comments on our debate with Owen and JJ on Christianity versus atheism, and you said that debate made your brain hurt and everything.
Yes.
To quote you directly, I mean, and here's I understand this from Wikipedia, but there's citations on each little thing here. Article 24 of Hitler's. I'm going to see if I can actually I'm going to see if I can just have this present on.
Well, you've got it pulled up on your other screen, so can you go full screen with that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna have it present. I'm streaming. I'm joining you guys right now through the tablet, and there's my computer. As I think that's the only way I could get it to work. So hide the professionalism on S-Man Speaks, by the way. Article 24 of Hitler's National Socialist Program of 1920 had endorsed what it learned when it termed positive Christianity, but placed religion below party ideology by adding its caveat that it must not offend the moral sense of the German race. Non-denominational, the term can be easily variously interpreted by allaying fears among German Christians majority as too oft expressed anti-Christian convictions of large sections of the Nazi movement. It further proposed a definition of positive Christianity, which could combat, and I say this with quotes, spirit. And then it goes on to talk about this further, but I'm going to let you guys respond. But actually, I'm going to have to ask HUMANe, where would I exactly be wrong on saying that there's no evidence to prove that God's real. And I understand Aspie says, you can't prove something with evidence that's spiritual. And it sounds more of a cop-out of admitting that, yeah, there's nothing that you can prove objectively that God's real or was real.
Okay. Yeah, so I believe we've talked about this before. I don't remember if it was on the stream or just over Twitter. So you cannot prove God using science. So that's because if God exists outside of the known universe, and you can't prove something that is outside of the observable universe with science, because science relies on observations, things that we can detect in the universe. So if we find, if there's some tool that we can discover to let us view things outside of our known universe, then there might be a way to prove some existence, something is out there beyond the universe. But that seems really, really, that seems like not even science fiction. That seems like an impossibility to prove something exists outside of our universe. Like that is, anything that is outside of our universe would be purely theoretical. So we can't prove God through science. I would say that we can prove God through deduction and through philosophy. And that is how I've come to my understanding of a religious deity. It's not through scientific evidence, but it's in eliminating all other possibilities.
Well, I wouldn't say scientific specifically. I like scientific evidence. Maybe just in general, anything that could show that there's a God. And I think I made that a point in the debate, which I think I'll put a link in the description after this so people can see it for themselves. That the initial claim would be from the religious side saying that God's real, and the atheist side would be asking. Then the burden of proof falls on the religious, and the religious had not lived up to the fulfilled to put that instead, fulfilled the burden of proof, and since the burden of proof has not been fulfilled, it's just that a claim.
I get that point of view. My position is that the burden either for or against relies on either side. The correct position should be a neutral position until evidence for or against can be presented. But in that particular instance, normally when you're talking about evidence, they're trying to use scientific evidence and all this sort of thing in order to prove or disprove God. That tends to be where most people focus. And from my perspective, I'm like, that's a waste of time and energy, because you cannot prove a universal negative, and you cannot prove a universal, well, I guess you technically could prove a universal positive. Like we assume, there's the assumption that gravity is a universal constant. We assume that the speed of light is a universal constant, although that is apparently up for debate, because, hey, the speed of light can't be constant if space is increasing, because that gives us two variables in the equation, and the only reason you can figure out one variable is if it's the only variable in the equation. When you have two question marks in an equation, you can't figure out either because you need one to figure out the other, then they're both going to remain question marks. So the speed of light as we know it is based on space being constant, and so if space is movable, if space is ever expanding, well, then the speed of light changes. It's no longer a constant. So sorry, I didn't want to get off on that tangent, but that is my I forgot what started me down that, but the point was we keep trying to use science to prove something as absolute, which God would need to be, is either absolutely not real or absolutely real. And science, that is not the realm of science. Science can only detect what is and try to explain why. It doesn't, explain how. It cannot explain why, and it cannot explain things that are not observable, and it cannot explain everything that is observable all at once, because we're limited by human observation. So you can't, unless you have some way of observing everything in the universe all at once, you can't make a claim, completely 100% one way or the other.
So if I may rewind the conversation a little bit, what was that you said earlier about evidence and neutrality?
Oh, I was saying the correct position is the neutral position until evidence can be provided. It's like a hypothesis. The religious hypothesis is that God is real. The atheist hypothesis is that God isn't real. But until it is settled, the correct position is a question mark. We don't know. You can have your hypothesis, but you can't say that your hypothesis is backed by evidence. You can't say your hypothesis is absolute. This should be a law. This should be a theory. That until in the realm of science, when it comes to the existence of God, all you can have is that hypothesis. There's nothing we can do to prove one way or the other.
On that note, with that setup, I think that in like past religious discussions that S-Man is basically like claiming atheism is basically the position of neutrality. Am I misrepresenting in that, S-Man?
I don't remember. I don't remember ever actually saying that. I don't think I ever actually said that. I mean, unless you can give me a specific stream and a timestamp. Other than that, I don't remember actually ever saying that.
You didn't actually say neutrality, but you said basically that your position of atheism is that it requires evidence. Like basically, the burden of proof is on Christians, and so therefore there isn't any real burden of proof on atheists. So I don't know. Well, I guess I came to the conclusion kind of that was basically you implying that atheists are like neutral when it comes to the evidence issue. Like,
I don't think that is not what I would have said. It's that the burden of proof, the initial claim came from the religious, and the atheist said, "All right, prove it," and the religious had failed to fulfill the burden of proof. I think the most neutral side out of this whole religious discussion, like in a religion discussion, is the truly neutral are the apatheists instead. As for if the atheists,
not agnostics.
Well, they can be.
Is similar. It's the I don't care.
Yeah, like agnostic is you're not sure. Apatheism is I don't give a fuck about religion. I've spoken with apatheists and the like. They can live absolutely fine, not giving a fuck about whether there's a God or not. The truly happy ones out of anyone that would have anything to do with religion. Because if the atheist made the claim there's no God, I'd say, all right, citation needed or something. I mean, because usually, I mean, if you question religion or criticize it, I mean, you're just asking for, I don't view it as making a claim if you're like, all right, can you prove that God's real? Or can you, like, that in general. Like, if an atheist says, I can prove 100% there's no God, I'll say, all right, I want to hear this, because that's going to be interesting. You know.
Okay, so I don't think that I can prove 100% that there is a God, because I still doubt whether there is or there isn't. I know a lot of people I do talk to, that even family members and stuff, are absolutely convinced that there is a God. But I think for me personally, I think we can eliminate all other possibilities. And so it's possible that there is an explanation for life as we know it that doesn't include a God. I am open to that possibility, but everything that I have heard to this point in my life falls short of being plausible. So there's, so originally the main viewpoint of the world was that there is a God, and a lot of people were religious. And then evolution it started in smaller increments. So at first it was the earth is flat and whatever, and then like, okay, then the earth is round. So that right there puts kind of people are starting to use that as kind of a critique of the Bible, because the Bible does say circle the earth, and it could have said sphere or something along those lines. And so people are, I mean, I'm just talking about Christianity seems to be, it's not the majority. Well, actually, is it still a majority? I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up between
Islam and
Christianity. But it tended to be the common religion amongst scholars and scientists for most of the last 2,000 years or so. But even, let's see, with the ancient Greeks, was like what 500 BC or something like that, where they were talking about the the Earth isn't flat and stuff like. Hey, sorry, I'm going off on tangents. Let me.
No, you're fine.
Focus.
Yeah,
but
okay,
so Earth being round is kind of counted as a dig against the Bible and Christianity as a whole. The Earth the Earth orbiting the sun instead of the sun orbiting the Earth is another thing that was used to kind of build this case against the Bible. Although I'm not quite sure, because as far as I know, the Bible doesn't really say one way or the other as far as how the solar system works in that manner. And then the other thing that came along is kind of like the death nail in the coffin of God, is what people were saying, was evolution. Because, hey, if the Earth isn't the center of the universe, or it's not even the center of our own solar system, the Earth seems to be just like any other spheroid body in the solar system that we can observe. So there's nothing uniquely special about Earth other than that Earth has life, and we can kind of explain life without a god through evolution. And so with that, well, we've got all these other explanations. Why do we need a god to explain how we came to be? And so that's in people consider that the death nail in the coffin of God. Now. Right? So, with me? So religion was first, and then science was supposedly the thing that killed God. Right? So we're all,
okay, so,
all on the same page there?
Yeah.
I'm actually
I understand.
I have myself muted, so yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually a part of this Wikipedia article I'll also put in the description that I really want to hear your guys' comments on. Hitler on atheism. During his career, for a variety of reasons, Hitler made various comments against atheistic movements. He associated atheism with Bolshevism, communism, and Jewish materialism. Overy writes of Hitler as skeptical of all religious belief, though not a thorough atheist. I thought there was a religious quote of Hitler where he said God was great or something. I'm going to try and find that, but
God's carrying us through this war, something like that.
I think that he may have said that, but I have to find the quote.
War. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All right, but
well, like I said a little bit earlier, he's not necessarily an atheism. I'm personally not claiming that Hitler was necessarily an atheist or non-religious. I'm just saying that I would find it really hard to believe for anyone to convince me that he was specifically a Christian, considering the article that I just read of him persecuting Christian pastors and preachers. That's all I'm saying personally.
I think there was discrimination. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was some discrimination against atheists in Nazi Germany. As if this article will load, if it will.
All right.
I guess I can get rid of a few tabs if that can help speed this process up. If it can't, finally it works. Okay. Discrimination against atheists, both present and historically, includes the persecution. Okay. Discrimination against atheists, both at present and historically, includes the persecution of those identifying themselves or labeled by others as atheists, as well as the discrimination against them. Discrimination against atheists also may also refer to comprise the negative attitudes towards prejudice, hostility, hatred, fear, and or intolerance towards atheists or atheism. Because atheism can be defined in various ways, those discriminated against or persecuted on the grounds of being atheists might not have considered atheists in a different time or place. As of 2015, 19 countries punished their citizens for apostasy, and in 14 of those countries, it is punishable by death. I don't think Hitler, like, if you're critical of religion, you don't have to necessarily be an atheist. I guess you could say agnostic. Like when anyone says Hitler was an atheist, I would really be questioning that because if we go down here, in Germany during the Nazi era, the 1933 decree stated that no National Socialist may suffer detriment on the grounds that he does not make any religious profession at all. However, the regime strongly opposed godless communism, and all of Germany's atheist and largely left-wing free-thought organizations were banned the same year. Some right-wing groups were tolerated by the Nazis until the mid-1930s. During the negotiations leading up to the Nazi Vatican Congress of April 26, 1933, Hitler stated that secular schools can never be tolerated because of their irreligious tendencies. Hitler routinely disregarded this undertaking, and the Reich Concordat. It's a little bit late, so if I'm stuttering or whatever, that's as a whole by 1939, all Catholic denominational schools had been disbanded or converted to public facilities.
So basically, we can just say that he wasn't affiliated with any of us in this chat, and that he was basically just his own asshole of his own asshole-ish beliefs.
Yeah.
But so
he claimed to have stamped out the atheistic movement. However, he used the word in the speech. I can't even pronounce that, but apparently it means godless movement in German. And it refers to the communist free thought movement, though it might not refer to atheism in general.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because I've argued with people who say that communism was a religious religious institution and it's based on the concept of altruism, and you're just like, wait, what? That's just my perspective. So I've had people argue both for and against Nazis, saying they were religious or they weren't religious, and I've had people argue for and against communism, saying both ways. So
I mean, if this article is as true as I'm going to hope it is, because then again there are citations throughout this paragraph.
So
I'll look into that
I
later.
am under the impression that the Nazi regime and the communist regime were not religious. So those were ideologies that were not based on any actual religion. So, which is why I would attribute them more toward the atheist viewpoint of the world. I think that those are ideologies that stem from not thinking that there is a God, or either thinking that there is no God or that they don't know if there is a God. That's my understanding of it, is that those ideologies came from that kind of perspective.
When it comes to the whole Nazi thing with Hitler, if we focus on Hitler, I view it as he was just against everybody, from how I interpret this article here. You got
but that, I mean, so if he was a religious person, like say if he was a actual practicing Christian, then he couldn't have that point of view, or at least he shouldn't have that point of view, because that's contradictory to the core values of being a Christian. If he wasn't a Muslim, then he also wouldn't have that position, because even though we associate Muslims with ISIS terrorists and beheadings and all kinds of brutal practices, there are still tenets in there of how to treat people that either so they call Muhammad, let's see, what was the phrase that's referred to? The people of the book, I think, or something along those lines, or maybe it's children of the book. But it's talking about Christians and Jews and how they are while they are supposedly like less than Muslims, they're still supposed to be treated well, and they're not supposed to be going and outright killing Christians and Jews. They can kill all the infidels they want, according to the Quran, but they're supposed to treat Christians and Jews better because those are viewed as something similar to the Muslim religion, because they're all of them stem from Abrahamic religions, which, I mean, Judaism would be the oldest religion based off of Abrahamic teachings, but the Quran includes part of the Torah. I mean, it includes all of the Torah and all of the Jewish teachings. It includes parts of the Bible, and then it's got other stuff on there as well. So because they share so much in similarity, the Muslims are supposed to treat Christians and Jews well, and then the infidels are the evil people that need to be beheaded and all this sort of thing. So if Hitler was either one of those religions, or if Hitler was a Buddhist, well, then he still wouldn't have had his perspective. I mean, how many genocides have been committed by Buddhists? If he was a Hindu, same sort of thing. Now, if he was, like, say, a Muslim attacking Hindus, well, then Hindus would be kind of the infidels, right? So then that would be sort of justified, and then you could kind of understand and relate Nazism to that religion. But no religion that I know of supports and endorses the behaviors, or would lead someone to believe, or would lead someone to the actions committed by the Nazi regime. So it should be a religious.
According to this article, which is a little citation next to what I've highlighted, in a 1928 speech, it claims that Adolf Hitler said, "We tolerate no one in our ranks who attacks the ideas of Christianity, fact our movement is Christian. And I'm not trying to accuse you of any fallacies here, but doesn't it sound a bit of like a no true Scotsman fallacy? I mean, just a little bit. I mean, I'm not trying to say you're pulling a no true Scotsman, but it seems like that maybe around the areas of it. Like,
no, I mean,
he's not a... Huh?
Like, I understand the no true Scotsman fallacy, but like, I don't think that is what is going on here, because you can say you are one thing. So I can say I'm an honest man as I take your coat and as I steal your wallet and as I tell you that your wife just died when she's locked in my trunk. I can say, oh, but I'm an honest man. I'm an honest man. Would saying that I'm a dishonest person be using the no true Scotsman fallacy? And that's what I would say about the Nazis. And I'm like, well, here are the properties of being a Christian. Here are the tenets that Christians are supposed to live by. Jesus said it in 2 commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. If those are the core tenets of being a Christian, and Adolf Hitler is imprisoning people against their will, taking away their rights to defend themselves, killing them and forcing them to work in slave camps, in enacting a war against the world. Can you really say that he's a Christian because he says in a speech that he is a Christian? To me, that makes no sense. Those are 2 diametrically opposed positions, especially when Jesus is the one who said, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. And, well, Hitler lived by the gun and died by the gun. So
yeah.
if he's saying he's a Christian and doing all the things that Jesus told people not to do, or not abiding by what the founder of the religion was advocating people do, can you say he is that thing? It's...
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean,
it's like saying I'm an atheist, and then you go to church every Sunday and you pray to God, and you're like, oh, but I'm an atheist. And you're like, well, then why are you doing things that an atheist would not do, right? If you're, it seems hypocritical at the least, but
cognitive dissonance. Well, I wouldn't say cognitive dissonance, but I'd say they would not understand atheism if they're doing that. I mean, and love thy neighbor, or something. Your mic lagged a little as you're saying love thy neighbor as something along those.
It's love thy neighbor.
Well, then that's how. Yeah, then I guess a lot of people who identify as Christians would not be considered Christians by that, because, like, I mean, and this is not to generalize or anything, but there's some Christians who are absolutely hateful pieces of shit, just like how there's some Muslims.
Yes,
they're hateful pieces of shit, and there's some agnostic people and atheists that are hateful pieces of shit. You know, I do think that the problem with some people is, sometimes you can say, oh, how they interpret Christianity makes them a hateful piece of shit, and some are loving Christians who are open-minded and stuff, and there's some that are very, very close-minded. What are your...
So as far as the no true Scotsman fallacy, my understanding of it is similar to how it's being applied to Islam, right? So there are the extreme groups in Islam where people are saying, oh, but that's not all Muslims, and those are only the fringe, and those are only the, you know. But if you look at if you're actually reading from the Quran, and there's all kinds of people who have looked at the Quran and cited cited the actual passages where it says to do the things that ISIS is doing, and you're like, well, how that to me is the no true Scotsman fallacy, is the, oh, but they're not with us, and you're like, but they're doing as you say. They're following the doctrines of what it is to be one of you. So how can you disassociate yourself with them? I would say Antifa is another example of that you would look at it and be like, oh, but that's not. I mean, they're not real
anti-fascists.
Yeah. They say they're fighting fascists, and yet they do all of the things that a fascist would do, and you're like, well, their name doesn't apply to what they're doing. So you can't say that is saying that Antifa are fascist. People would say, oh, well, that's the no true Scotsman fallacy. And you're like, no, that doesn't apply there because they aren't abiding by the ideas of what they're supposed to be, embodying.
Yeah.
Whereas with Islam, you're like, well, it looks like they are practicing the things that your ideology teaches to do. So separating yourself from them doesn't quite make sense if it's still within the realm of that, in my mind, it'd be... Oh, sorry, I'm going off on tangents and tangents.
No, you're all right. I don't know why I have Movie Maker open, but whatever. But okay, hang on a second.
We had like J.J. Skinner and Cult of Ham on, at that point, I think it would just turn into a huge shout fest here.
Maybe your audio is lower than audio is low as fuck. I'm gonna find a way to control room. No, your audio is all the way up. I don't know how the hell to raise it any more than your audio is pretty low, Zach. But yeah, I can
Me versus
hear you.
Cult of Ham 2 version 2 is gonna happen on Sunday, and I don't.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, Cult of Ham versus Humane Mind 2.
Yeah, that'll be on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, from the consensus of the cancer
microphone device is like broken or something. I thought it was just the virus that I had on my computer a little earlier, but I don't know. Maybe it's broken or something.
What the fuck are you watching then? I'm kidding. But
yeah, I mean, you gotta stop having sex with your computers. That's how good virus is.
As for the consensus of the podcast, that everyone thinks you made Cult of Ham your bitch. Like, there was a Twitter poll about it. Everyone's saying that you won, but I mean, I actually would have to say I more lean towards...
He said that, but then I was talking to my brother, and I'm like, oh, because he was saying that it was a 60-40, and I'm like, really? You think it was that close?
Like, I kind of want to hear S-Man. You kind of interrupted him. Humane, no offense, but...
Oh, no, you're fine. I think it's the majority... if I can find it... if we go to the U.S. prison population... What percentage of them are that are in there are like religious versus the non-religious part of the prison population? Because people are like, oh, they can't be very moral if they're ending up in like fucking prison.
Well, you have to also look at how many of them converted to a religion when they were in prison, as opposed to being religious before going in. So while there is a huge amount of people in prison who are religious, the majority of them convert in prison. That is huge. Yeah. There's a huge number of people who go in being without a particular religion, and then finding and coming out with a Islamic name.
That to me would be kind of a bit hilarious if like that when people convert to Islam. But I'm not gonna shame them over it. I'm not an asshole.
No, I mean it happens. People convert to Islam and Christianity because in prison. That's usually when people hit rock bottom. When you are locked in a cell, crying yourself to sleep at night, surrounded by dudes who want to kill you or rape you, you tend to find religion in a situation like that, right? You're like, anything to save me from my circumstance. The same thing happened with my dad. My dad was raised Catholic, and it was in a prison in Korea. Yeah, I believe it was Korea. So he was in the army, and while he was in the army, he was doing drugs and stuff like that. And so he got busted for it and ended up in a foreign prison, couldn't speak the language, couldn't save himself. And yeah, he found God pretty quick there. And yeah.
Wait, he was a Catholic though before, you say?
He was raised in Catholicism, but he is not practicing. So my grandpa and grandmother are very religious and they were very into Catholicism. Now I think they are Protestant. But for the rest of their children, nothing to do with Catholicism, and most of them, let's see. So they had 8 kids, and of the 8, 3 aren't religious at all. Yeah, so the other 5 are somewhat religious, or
Yeah.
some variation.
As for if I can remember,
But-
what I was gonna say is I think it'd be better if when they report, oh, there might be a large chunk of religious people in prison, is if they could also factor in, okay, were they religious going in, or are they now religious? I think that'd be a lot better and a lot more clear.
The other factor that you have to look at is what is the overall percentage of the population that is religious, and then how many of that percentage is in prison, right? So while so there's 2 factors in that. I mean, because this was something that, I don't know if you watched Roaming Millennial's speech at Lafayette. Oh, it's hilarious but sad. But that was something that was brought up when they're like, oh, look at the number of rapists who are white people. It's 57%. And you're like, but the number of white citizens in the United States is like 70+% of the population, which means, 70% of the population. No, not atheist whites, just whites that rape. And you're like, okay, well, the overall percentage of the population of the United States that is white is about 70-something%. I don't know the exact number. And then you're like, wait, so 70-something% versus 57%, which means you should see a 1-to-1 ratio, right? If 70% of the United States was, 70% was white and then 70% of rapists were white, that would make sense because it'd be a direct 1-to-1. Or if 80% were rapists, then you'd be like, ooh, then, whites are overrepresented. But because it's 57, you're like, whites are underrepresented in the rapist category, which means the other 43% are being made up by non-white people who make up 30% of the population. That is a pretty big swing, right? 30% of the population is committing 43% of the rapes. So that's why I want to say, when you're looking at the population of prisons that is religious, look at the population of the United States that claims to be some sort of religious, and get a per capita ratio of that group that is in prison, right?
Yeah.
And which, if you look at the overall numbers of people who commit crimes and who are in prison and all that sort of thing, it is a really, really small number. So out of 320-something million people in the United States, the number of people who have been to prison or have been arrested or are criminals, it's like 1 or 2%, I think. It's so.
Is it me, or is like your camera seems to be frozen on the same flabbergasted shot as man, like you're just hanging with your mouth open right now.
No.
Fucking hell, that's it. Camera's going off. Don't need people to see my cancerous mug. Anyway, so now there's 2 of my what people I've had people comment that my profile picture looks like a Satanist, and to be honest, I actually tried to dress up as one, and that's why you have the profile picture. I
think you need to unbutton the rest of the buttons and just leave the top one button, and then you will look like a cholo.
Well, I actually have a black and gray flannel, and I get comments like that all the time. It's fucking funny. So, just out of curiosity, since we're on the topic of religion, I don't know if you guys have heard. It's been talked about by a number of people, is that Iceland was issuing travel bans against white Southern Baptists.
Really?
I'm not entirely sure how true it is, as I've been thinking about it as of recently. Iceland travel ban.
Was it just because, was that like a protest thing? Like, oh, Trump is banning Muslims, let's ban Southern Baptists. And you're like, but it wasn't a Muslim ban.
It was a travel restriction, It's like I actually could. I think his ban, the travel ban on those Islamic nations, made some sense, to be honest.
Well, no, the other factor is like, okay, you're excluding the Philippines, which has a very large Muslim population.
Yeah.
India was not on that list. India and Pakistan, and you're like, if you want to go to the places with the largest concentration of Muslims, India, Pakistan, and the Philippines. I think there are more Muslims in those 3 countries than there are in all of the Middle East, because there's more people.
Yeah.
India alone is like over 1 billion people there, and it's something like it is a staggering amount of people in India. So India is like half Hindu, half Muslim, or at least something around that range. So it's like 60% of 1 billion people are Muslims, all in that one country by itself, and you're like, and that country wasn't banned.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
thing that I have with religious people travel bans is that people can just claim whatever religion they want to. Like, say if the liberals' fear-monger scenario has come true and that Trump was actually banning all Muslims. You believe in Allah, you believe that Muhammad was the one true prophet. Oh, you're not coming to the United States. Just ban all of them, moderate, extreme. It doesn't matter where on the spectrum you sit, like Sunni, Shiite, whatever. But say if that was really the case. The thing is that any of them, Sunnis or Shiites or any type of Muslims, can claim to be a Christian, and then they would get into the United States. They could like easily forge themselves to be of a one particular religion. I mean, especially if it's just like a question that you're just asking them, hey, what religion are you? Oh, I'm Christian. Oh, welcome in.
Yeah, and especially when there's the practice of taqiyya, which is you're allowed, or not only are they allowed to lie to, but they're supposed to lie in order to further their religion. So they're supposed to lie to.
Oh, good Lord!
Which, it's like, hey, we want to further our religion. Well, we can't teach them the real stuff, so we can lie to them. So if they're trying to get into the United States in order to further their religion, well, then they can. I mean, there's nothing in their religion that says they absolutely cannot lie. It actually says, hey, you guys should lie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Lie to the infidels. To the.
I'm pretty sure that me and S-Man will be great pals if I consistently lie to him about my religion and what the Bible actually says.
No, I like it. I like honest people. I think people being honest with their religion. Like, to me, like when I saw his profile for the very first time, it said Christian. I'm like, okay, I didn't really give a fuck. Or if it would have said Muslim, I would have thought, I don't care. I mean, as long as you're not like blowing shit up in public, I don't care. And as long as like, as long as Zach here does not like attack an abortion clinic, I don't really give a shit about him being a Christian. I don't view him as like an evil, oppressive person that the SJWs need to worry about. I've heard people argue that if even though people argue that atheism has no moral foundation, that they argue that
I brought that up earlier. I wanted to make sure that you could hear that because you were having audio issues at the point.
To address that, I've been seeing the religious and I would say non-religious go back and forth on all over Facebook claiming that Iceland has, I think it's Iceland. They say Iceland is like an atheist sweat dream, basically, where the crime rate is pretty low, and I think it's atheist majority there. 8% is this one from Pinterest says, which is not a reliable source, but I think they do. I think atheists might make up the majority of Iceland. But people have been claiming that it has a pretty low crime rate, but it's mostly atheist. And there was a fact check by Snopes.com saying that the whole thing with the Southern Baptist travel ban, I think it says it's false, so I'm just going to assume it's probably not credible in general. Atheist percentage.
So there's a lot of things about those Nordic countries where, so I mean, it's not just Iceland that has a low crime rate. It's all of those countries up there: Scandinavia, Norway, Iceland, Greenland. Oh, what's the other one? Nova Scotia? No, not Nova Scotia.
That's in Canada.
No. What's the other one up there? I guess
Finland, Denmark.
Finland, Denmark,
and Holland, and all those sort of things. They all seem to be fairly low in crime. Well, with the exception of Sweden, right? Sweden is now the rape capital of the world, or something like that.
Yeah, and
so a lot of those countries, but there are a lot of things about those countries where they all have a very similar population. They all have, I mean, their cultures are very similar to each other, and their racial makeup or their ethno makeup is very similar. So I mean, you're talking about a group of people who all have similar values, similar heritages, similar cultures. And yeah, you're going to see similar stuff. Whereas with other countries where there's a mix of things and there's conflicting people right next to each other. So not only do you have people of different races, and so then there might be that, oh, hey, you're a different race, and there's stupid people who think that race matters, and like, hey, they're different from me, and therefore we need to fight over some shit that doesn't really matter. but there's also the, hey, they have a different culture than me, and so then there's culture clash, and that can be the lead to conflicts and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to point to Iceland and say they have a low crime rate because they're atheist when there are so many other factors. That's what I'm trying to say. Is there could be a number of reasons why that is the case.
Yeah, I just want to get your guys' thoughts on that.
I think that a lot of alt-right race realists would like use that line of logic to try and justify white nationalism, because lack of diversity decreases violence, decreases tensions, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Lack of diversity in the races and religions and political beliefs. We must keep everybody of one race, of one mindset, blah, 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 for the collective.
Yeah, that is their typical argument, but and it makes sense because it is statistically, you can prove that there's less crime amongst people who have a similar ethnic makeup, because they view everybody that has similar race to them as part of their in-group. I mean, it's in-group preferences is something that's pretty prevalent. The problem I see is that they are giving up so much more in order to achieve that peace or whatever. They're giving up all kinds of things that come with associating with people of other races, and cultures. They're ultimately harming themselves by trying to isolate and segregate themselves. I think even though it's lower crime rate and there are benefits to that, I would say the negatives of isolation outweigh the positives of security. And it's that Ben Franklin phrase, those who would sacrifice freedom for security shall have and deserve neither. That's what I think the ethno-nationalists and the white nationalists, that's what I think they're doing, is they're sacrificing freedom for security, and it works sort of, but ultimately they're stifling themselves. So there are so many benefits of working with other people, and people of different races can share your same values. And so there's lots of people that I hang out with, and the only difference between us as far as our core values, so we share core values, we share common interests, and the only difference between us is race. And you're like, well, why should race why should race even matter here at all? Because we share so much else in common. I would rather share my interests and my values with someone and not share my race than share my race with someone and not have anything in common as far as interests, not have anything in common as far as values. That seems preposterous. But that's the white nationalist perspective, is, oh, as long as we're of the same race, everything will work out. And you're like, there's people of the same race as you who believe the exact opposite of what you believe. So how does that work for you?
The way that I look at it is that lack of diversity kind of makes you, I don't want to sound like a social justice warrior, but kind of intolerant and not ready for like opposing beliefs or any sorts of things. Because I brought this example up in my debate with Owen McDonald on the topic of jokes versus bigotry. I brought up of how my past was basically a Christian conservative echo chamber. And so that made me kind of unprepared and kind of mentally weak, I guess you could say, in my teenage years for the internet, that when I would have a whole bunch of liberal atheist information swarming at me, and it would just make me unprepared and unbraced for that. And so in a way, it kind of made me feel miserable to have my beliefs like basically destroyed like that.
Yeah.
And so I say that the diversity, I'm not trying to make the argument for forced diversity or for forced racial nationalism or any kind of nationalism of any kind based on off of a ethnicity or belief. But still, all in all, I am for diversity, just not forced diversity, just so that people can like be prepared to be tolerant, so that they can like prepare themselves for if they were to ever meet somebody of an opposing belief or of a different race or whatever.
Yeah, because I think that social justice warriors take it a step too far when they say diversity for diversity's sake, and you're like, wait, no. We're saying diversity has its benefits because you're expecting that diversity to have different perspectives, to offer something new that you haven't experienced, to offer variety. but their perspective is just, hey, we just got a variety of skin color. Ooh. They're like, hey, we just have a variety of skin color, but it's all the same everything. And you're like, wait, how does that help? That's their perspective, is like, hey, we all think the same, we all act the same, we all quote the same, but we have a diversity of skin color. And I know that sounds kind of contradictory to something I just said, but hanging out with a group because you like hanging out with them is different from like working with people or building an entire country based off of people with that same type of setup. So I guess I need to clarify. The social justice warriors think that if you have an all-white group of people that are all white and male and they all think and act the same, that's bad. But if you have a group of all different, every different race and they're all male and they all think the same, well, then that's slightly better. And if you have a group of all different, genders and races and, non-binaries and LGBT and they all think and act the same, well, then that's amazing. And you're like,
hypocrisy.
The all thinking and acting the same is a net positive, provided that thinking and acting the same is a positive all to itself, right? If they have the values and interests or whatever that are good, I guess that produce good results is what I guess I should say. Then it doesn't matter what the rest of that other stuff is. To me, the rest of that other stuff is interchangeable. You could, it could be all the same race or all the same sex, and that doesn't matter as long as those core values are a net positive. Yeah. But the social justice warriors are like, oh, well, they need to go and switch that up, their racial mix up and their genetic or their gender mix up, and you're like,
yeah, wasn't it? Did you guys hear about when I think the head of Apple or something said, 12 white men in a room that could be diverse, and she was forced to apologize for that comment. I guess that could be an example.
Yeah, because their idea of diversity is diversity of skin color and of immutable traits. That is their idea of diversity, whereas usually the idea of diversity, at least the benefits of diversity, is different viewpoints and different perspectives.
Yeah.
So while not every viewpoint and perspective is a overall positive, at least it can, if you have one viewpoint and you encounter a conflicting viewpoint, it gives you that comparison to balance the two and figure out which one is superior or not, right? If you're taking, hey, I was raised capitalist, and hey, what's this new communist thing? And then you get to weigh the two and be like, oh, you know what? I think I prefer capitalism to communism. But if you're never given that option, then you might be limited. So if you're in the other situation, you were raised communist your whole life and all you've ever known is communism, and then you encounter capitalism, well, then you're like, oh, well, now I either reinforce my communist viewpoints or maybe I choose capitalism. But if you never get that perspective in order to see both viewpoints, that limits your options, and you may never choose a better option. You may never see a better option. And that's the more beneficial diversity.
Yeah, I am like more for diversity in beliefs and ideas than that of race specifically. But on that note, I couldn't care less if, like, the United States, for example, became a majority Hispanic country or a majority of any other type of color other than white, just as long as, like, everybody is, like, generally speaking, of a liberty-minded perspective, not necessarily conservative or libertarian, but of liberty-minded. I mean, I don't really want the country, and no, not really don't. I really don't like the idea of the United States becoming a whole bunch of just liberty-hating, anti-liberty plebs like Owen McDonald, for example.
Yeah. To explain what happened when the audio went to pure autistic screeching on my part is I accidentally, the speakers were muted on my computer, and then I had my phone bump the switch, and then HUMANe almost killed himself with how bad the audio went. But yeah, I can actually attribute an example to what you guys were saying of diversity of thought. Before I started having discussions, I do believe I was in a bit of an echo chamber, and at the beginning of the year, I said to myself, that is going to be no longer a thing, and I started having these debates, and
Yeah.
16 or 17 debates later, here we are having a discussion on religion. And to be honest, I do view sometimes these things as a bit of a debate, as we do address each other's points and we do have some things to say. I'm going to try and see if maybe the audio problem is fixed if I switch mics. So what I'm going to do is
I think generally speaking, everybody was like basically raising it in their early childhood.
Your audio's going electronic.
Yep. So
My audio.
yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
You're full on Megatron.
Yes.
Is it better now?
Nope, sorry.
That was gross, son of Lucifer.
No.
Is it better?
Sorry.
No, I didn't burn, but all I did was this.
Yeah, it was one of those weird yawn things. He was just doing a reenactment of The Grudge.
It was the cry. It was the cry of the devil.
Okay, there you go. Now your audio's fixed, Zach. Sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Very quickly. Like I actually have to be leaving this stream here in a few minutes because I have to get to bed to get a decent amount of sleep to be jogging early, like 5 a.m. tomorrow with my sister. But very quickly, back on the topic of religion, something that I kind of wanted to ask everybody. Has anybody else here, aside from S-Man, seen my video that was titled Kyle Kalinske Gets Owned by Penn Jillette?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Like, it was probably one of your funniest videos because you triggered so many people.
And then I made like a full video responding to the comments, and then there was this one particular guy, Airbus Baby, where you dedicated a Thug Life video to. My response. Yeah. Again, thanks for that, S-Man. But yeah, the whole video.
S-Man, the audio is. We're getting that. We're getting like it sounds like a over the phone modem, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna use my built-in mic, but fuck it.
Yeah, fuck it in the butt. Yeah, but you gotta fix that problem with your other computer there. It sounds like you're trying to log into the internet with a dial-up modem.
But as I was saying, like that video, Kyle Kalinske Gets Owned by Penn Jillette. That was like basically just a boring it was a shit post out of boredom, basically. A few days before, I made a response video to Kyle Kalinske responding to a tweet from Ken Ham. The title of his video was "Atheists Don't Allow Creationism Because They're Insecure." That was the title of the video, and Kyle was basically titling it like that in order to like mock Ken Ham's logic, obviously. And he was just like running away. He was just affirming his own cowardice. Like, I've already known that Kyle Kalinske was a big coward for refusing to debate anybody of an opposite opinion, particularly conservatives. I mean, that might change recently that might change here in a bit because recently he released a video where he answered somebody's question, will you ever debate somebody like Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, or Milo Yiannopoulos? And he was still dancing around the subject, but still, all in all, I say that Kyle Kalinske is basically a coward in an echo chamber. And he was just affirming that in that video, responding to Ken Ham. And he was just strawmanning Ken Ham for wanting a Christian theocracy. Like, I do not know for sure if Ken Ham does or does not want a Christian theocracy where you only teach creationism in the public school, but that was not what he said at all in that tweet. Unless he specifically said it in the tweet, you are strawmanning him, Kyle Kalinske. That was my point in that video, and it was just pure right there. Yeah. And so the next day, I made a video dedicated to Kyle Kalinske getting owned. It was just a mock debate of Penn Jillette responding to that, because even Penn Jillette, a guy who is an atheist, and he's very passionately, I wouldn't call him an anti-theist, but he's very passionately against religion anyways, and even he still thinks that there should be a diversity of belief in the public school because he is like a free speech absolutist, I guess. And Kyle Kalinske, he claims to be for free speech, but really he is not. He is just such a pussy when it comes to other people's ideas. He doesn't like the idea of climate change being debated about on other
He needs
forums.
testosterone.
Yeah, he definitely needs testosterone. He sounds like his balls haven't even dropped. He sounds like a 12-year-old like trying to impersonate a grown man. And whenever he decides to play the ad hominem against Mark Levin or anyone else who has a high-pitched voice like Ted Cruz or Mark Levin, I just like play that ad hominem back at him. Like, dude, you're one to talk about voices. You sound like a little boy. Try to be a grown man.
What do I sound like?
What do you sound like?
You sound like a tranny.
You sound like you're a fucking 23 truck driver, and yet you're fucking 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of when sometimes religion, like economics and religion mix? Because I remember talking to Zach about Christian communism. I think there's also Islamic socialism or communism. I think there's Islamic and Christian communism, and I think Islamic socialism. I think that there is. I've heard people say, "Oh, I'm a Christian communist," which
I don't think that.
There's actually. Let me see if I can find it, because I think there was I remember seeing an article about Christian communism. I'm like, what? Christian communism?
Yeah.
Christian communism.
Okay. So before we go down that, I did want to say some things about some of our previous topics here. Okay, so as far as surrounding yourselves with various viewpoints, I really thoroughly enjoy that. Although when you're hanging out with your group of friends, you tend to hang out with people that you share more in common with. So like this podcast right here is kind of an example. So while we disagree on things that I think ultimately they matter, but they're less significant in the long run because, hey, we're all treating each other pretty fairly. We're not trying to talk over each other. We're not yelling at each other. We're not threatening each other's lives and things like that. We all have somewhat similar interests and values.
Right. I mean, we're all basically libertarians when it comes to social issues and economic issues, I would think. I mean, we disagree on the issue of abortion. Actually, I think I'm the only pro-lifer here.
No, I'm pro-life as well, but...
You are?
I'm somewhat pro-life. Yes. I mean...
I think that we can chat about that another time. Yeah, me and Zach had a debate about abortion a couple months back. It was more productive than some of the debates I've had, to be honest, but yeah.
So while we do share those core values, and there are differences in our opinions and viewpoints, and it's great that we're having these kinds of discussions, but we also, all of you have gone out of your way to talk to people who believe things drastically different. So even while, on all these conversations we've talked about communism, and I don't think anybody here is pro-communist and that sort of thing, but you've all gone on and talked to Owen McDonald, you talk to various people, you link to videos of people debating that sort of topic. So that, I think, is one thing where, when we're talking about diversity of thought, that is something where people who tend to be more leftists and liberals and stuff like that, they don't want to encourage that kind of thing. And yet, it seems like people who are more of the conservative leaning or right leaning tend to engage people of the opposite perspective, because it's kind of the more of the, am I right? Is my viewpoint of the world correct? Let's challenge it. Let's either reinforce my viewpoint of the world or possibly learn something that, like, oh, I learned something today and now I no longer hold this belief, and now I have this new belief because, hey, it won out. It was superior. But it seems like the left doesn't want to engage in that type of debate because they might be wrong. And you're like, well, if you're wrong, Gavin McInnes said this brilliantly in an interview with Crowder, and he said, I love losing debates because I win the truth. And I was like, you know what? I really like Gavin McInnes. I think he's hilarious, but damn, he's got some insightful quotes. Because I don't know if that's his or if he found that from someone else, but I was like, dude, that is amazing. That is a brilliant insight on his part. Yeah. So
you basically win the truth as a prize.
Yes.
Yeah.
You sure I lose the debate, I win the truth, and you're like, dude, that's
pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, like I do consider my third debate with Owen. I do consider it to be somewhat of a loss on my part. But hey, I won. I got to hear a different viewpoint, and I got to think about something more critically. Huh?
Yeah.
Which
Like
one
that,
was
like it was the one about the ethics of punching Nazis. And he was for it, and I was against it. But I do get there's some justification to it, and I do get that there's some. They're not entirely without a reason, even though I still view it as maybe we should try to find some other way to deal with those people, but and always say violence and physical force as the last option. But I do get why they might want to do it. It's just I don't know. I guess I'm just the type of person where it's like I would rather not go to violence, but if we have to, then fuck it. Then I guess we'd have to.
So there was something else
Yeah.
that I think you brought up, but I don't think was quite resolved, or at least not to my understanding. Is from an atheist perspective, how do you provide a foundation for morality?
Basically, well, I can't really speak for all atheists. I guess I can only speak for myself. How I do it is the simple fact of the matter being that I just take a look at all groups of people, and my morality it just lies on I don't want to be mistreated by any group of. I don't want to be mistreated because of me being a part of any group of people. Therefore, I'm not going to mistreat. It's basically just treat others how you want to be treated.
Yeah.
Like there's some parts of
type thing, right?
Basically, your morality is based off of the golden rule.
I guess you could say that. Like there's some parts of
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but
yeah. That's where I build it. Like some people, like there's some atheists who say that with religion they can see, oh, there's certain viewpoints that like do as to others as I'm butchering it because I can't remember the exact quote, but as they would do to you or something, and it's like I can make sense of that. That I can respect that. Like I don't want Zach to hit me in the face with his car. Well, I don't want to get hit with a car. Like I don't want Zach to hit me with a car, so I won't hit Zach with my car. Like, or I'm not gonna steal from any of you guys because I don't want any of you guys stealing from me. You know, that's just if you call that the golden rule, then yeah, I guess my morals are on the golden rule.
That's the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah,
and that's not a bad starter for your morality, definitely.
No, and it's very similar to the Christian, tenets, love thy neighbor as thyself. I mean, they're kind of similar to each other.
And it's also just
well, okay, so there is a problem with that point of view, though, and this is something, and maybe I'll get I mean, this is something I definitely plan on bringing up on Sunday. Is so you said, you don't want to have something happen to you, so you won't do it to someone else. Well, what if that other person is like, I really like pain, and so I'm going to inflict pain on other people? That's my problem with that perspective, is you can have people who don't think like you, and your same system of morality could be applied to them and have completely opposite results.
Oh, well, like if I treat others how I want to be treated, but I'm mistreated.
No. You treat other people how you want to be treated, right? And you want to be treated well.
Yeah.
Well, if a person doesn't want to be treated well, what's to stop them from treating others poorly as well? If someone hates themselves, why? Like they could treat other people just as poorly as they treat themselves.
Well, they're going to have consequences though at the end.
Yeah, it's like if they kill somebody, as an example, or they commit any type of crime, they're going to be arrested. And I also go with what the law is. Like if the law says don't publicly urinate in public, I ain't gonna do it.
Yeah, and I guess so that's definitely things we're going to talk about on Sunday. The law is based on morality. But if morality is based on people's what they want and what they choose, then the law can change. And then so yes, peeing in public may be illegal at the moment. 100 years from now, peeing in public may not be a social norm.
Yeah. To so me and Colta Ham we kind of conversed yesterday. Like, I sent him the link to hang out that will be in tomorrow on Sunday, and I wanted to hear his side of the story. And he's talking about what we were talking about whether or not morality is subjective. And I said, from my point of view, it is a bit of both. In some areas, it's objective. Like, we agree. Like, some people have to agree that, all right, this type of thing is morally wrong, like pedophilia, rape, giving people AIDS. You need to teach that to California today. But anyway, and in some areas, some people could argue morality is subjective.
I gotta correct you. It's just HIV. It's not full-blown AIDS.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but still,
much better, right?
It's still AIDS.
It's going to potentially lead to it. But then you also got, in some areas, people could say morality is subjective, and this was a talking point that I would see the vegans and the anti-vegans go over. Some say there's no part of like a human being or something. I cannot remember for the life of me, since some of these debates happened a while ago. There's no like particle of that is morality or something like that. That it's in some, like, if you like, is it morally wrong to eat meat? Some people say yes, some people say no. And they're not going to agree, and it would be like a difference of what they would define to be morality, and things like that.
Are you talking about the debate that Kraut T had with vegan gains?
No, I'm talking about the one that Ask Yourself had with cognitive thought.
Okay.
Morality. Because it's like
T was basically debating a lot about morality with vegan gains as well in his debate.
Oh yeah, I know.
So vegans, like vegan gains, want to apply morality to things other than humans. To the best of my knowledge, aside from the vegan community, no one else has ever in the history of the world ever applied morality to anything other than human interactions with other humans.
Yeah.
This is something I brought up in my video. You wouldn't say a lion eating a zebra. Would you call that immoral? Well, if we are applying morality to animals, we would have to call that murder. We would have to say that lion just murdered that zebra.
Well, I guess they'd say, well, it's justified because they do it to survive or something like that. You know?
Survive as well.
That's their excuse, but it's like, well, they're either a moral agent or they're not a moral agent. So it seems very weird to apply morality to a creature that cannot apply morality itself.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we need to treat animals morally, and you're like, but we can't guarantee they'll treat us morally in return. So, but with humans, I can treat you morally, and you can't. You have the ability to treat me morally in return.
Yeah.
If I can treat a lion, and I could treat him how I want to be treated. That's not going to stop him from mauling my face off.
Yeah.
And you get into the questions of, is it moral or immoral for a lion to be eating you, and is it moral or immoral for you to be self-defending yourself against that lion? Because the only reason why that lion is really eating you is because of his survivability. So
that creates all kinds of weird moral dilemmas.
If you're self-defending, if you're defending yourself against that lion, even though he's trying to survive, aren't you basically I don't know. It's just, it is a big moral dilemma. It just gets into the weeds.
Yeah, because when you're talking about humans, like from the vegan perspective, if I'm being attacked or someone's trying to kill me, I have the right to defend myself because that other human doesn't need to kill me. But if a lion needs to kill me to eat, then how can I defend myself from that? Because it's like, well, the human doesn't need to, so that you need to stop them. And it's like, well, the lion does need to, but also I would like to live. So I guess it's just a coin flip, right? It's like, well, it's coin flip on whether that's moral or not.
Yeah. The definition of morality is the principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. A particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specific person or society. The extent to which an action is right or wrong. Things like that. But I mean, that's just usually what morality is. But yeah, like
But nobody says that a storm is immoral. Like Hurricane Harvey was immoral. And you're like, it had no will of its own. It's just there. We only say something is evil when it is an act of a person. We don't say Hurricane Harvey was evil. We don't say a gorilla, or no. Let's take something a more real world example. We don't say, when somebody falls into a tiger pit and they get attacked by the tiger, we don't call that tiger evil. It's, I'm trying to think.
They're basically doing it for their own survival, for their own food supply. Has anyone ever heard of any other type of action being deemed evil except the actions of humans? Yeah. I guess I'm kind of a speciesist.
I guess you would say the devil is evil, but.
Well, oh god, the son of Lucifer. I hope he didn't trigger you much. But I just love teasing on Son of Lucifer because he poses to be the Antichrist, basically. But
your dad is evil.
Exactly.
Maybe for another stream we can talk about Satanism, because
oh god,
that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I actually did have a conversation last week with an ex-Satanist, but it wasn't on Satanism, unfortunately. I
guess the reason why I would think that it is okay for humans to be like eating lesser species, like be it a cow or a chicken, is that I'm a bit of a speciesist personally. Now, they'd be saying that's an appeal to the species. What if aliens come down? Well, it's kind of a combination of logical reasoning why I say that it is all right for humans to eat people of not people, to be eating creatures of a different species, of lesser species, is based off of civilization and culture as well. Because what if a different species is able to find civilization, build buildings, and basically be on the same level of intelligence as us humans? Then what about cannibalism against retarded humans, basically? Speciesism, like preservation of the species, but also of intelligence. The overall intelligence of humanity is better than that of the overall intelligence of any other species, of every other species. And so you cannot eat the retarded human being because he is biologically part of the human species, part of the species that is overall more intelligent than the overall intelligence of other species. I would base that. I would extend that to other. Tactic. I would extend that to other species as well. Like as soon as chickens are able to chicken pens with their with their lack of hands, that would be when I become vegan.
Yeah. So it's a sleazy tactic. I mentioned this in my video as well. Is so when they're talking about name one trait that humans have that animals don't, and then you'll name a trait, and they're like, yeah, but this animal has it, and they'll talk about the entire group of animals as if it's one solid thing. And then when you're talking about, well, intelligence, and then they're like, but what if one animal that is a gorilla has a really high IQ for a gorilla? Isn't that superior to the one individual who has a low IQ for a human? And you're like, wait, when did we stop talking about groups of things and start talking about individuals? Why? Yeah. So they shift between groups and individuals whenever it fits their conversation, where it fits their point of view. You're like, we're trying to apply something consistently to the entire thing, and they are changing it depending on whatever works better to serve their argument. It's a very sleazy argumentation tactic, where you talk about groups and individuals, and you don't put groups and individuals together. Like, so when you're talking about people who are mentally retarded are still members of the human race. Vegans like to separate that. It's like, well, you're talking about overall intelligence. Well, there are some humans who are lower intelligence. It's like, that doesn't stop them from being human. Yeah. Having lower intelligence for an animal is what determines they're an animal and not a human, right? But having lower intelligence from a human and being human doesn't stop you from being human.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's
weird that they would do that.
I think the closest, if I had a gun to my head and someone says to me, name a trait, like name the trait or get shot, the closest I probably could come up with is they're not very productive members of society. And if I was not a productive member of society and someone says, we're going to fucking kill you unless you're a productive member of society, then all right. You know. That would be probably the closest, but probably not the entirely best, I guess, trait you could name.
Kill all the homeless people. S Man said it, everybody.
That's what I heard.
Capitalist. I'm sorry. Like, like I would exclude those that are that are putting in effort to be productive members of society. Other than that, I'd say go fuck yourself.
I think he also said being comatose is basically demanding assisted suicide. Right? Isn't that what you guys heard? Like if you're in a coma, that means you want people to pull the plug. That's what I heard him say.
I view it as cruel to leave people in comas. Actually, I view that as a cruel thing to do. But
no, that's definitely my living will. My living will is give me 6 weeks. If I'm not recovered, pull that plug. I'm a human taxidermy at that point.
Prolong the suffering at that point.
Yeah. So maybe for another stream we can talk about like things like I think we've already pretty much covered veganism, but probably abortion, because that's something Zach and I disagree on, and Owen was being a little cuck about the topic, and Zach ended up bringing up an analogy. Why should we have pro-lifers? Like Owen asks, why should we have the pro-life side with their arbitrary view of what life is? And Zach brings up, a serial killer. Well, I guess that's what serial killers say when they're about to go and kill their victims.
The exact logic that he used was, why should anybody's value of life be a consideration in this argument? Like, he was just pushing aside, saying basically, I don't care what your views on life are. Dude, this is the reason why we have debates, to find out whose value of life is valid. I mean, you don't just, like, before the debate has even started, say blanketly, I don't care about your value of life. I'm going to kill the baby anyway. I mean, and he was, again, could have probably worded the response to him a whole lot better. But I was just trying to get through to him. Dude, that's the same thing that serial killers say. What line of logic do you think they use to try and justify killing other human beings? I don't care of what their value of life is. I'm going to fucking kill them anyway because I love human blood spilt on the floor.
Are you guys familiar with Gosnell? Have you? Name ring a bell? Yeah. That is definitely an example of abortion and serial killer all in one scenario, because that man was responsible for killing hundreds of babies. So not in the womb, not abortions, although it was at an abortion clinic. These were children outside of the mother, in which even by the pro-choice standard, once the baby's outside of the mother, it's no longer a part of the mother and she no longer has a choice. And yet this guy was leaving babies out to die outside of the mom. They were apparently, they were viable fetuses because they were still living outside of the mom, and they could have been saved, and he either let them die or would do things to them while they're,
Ben Shapiro brought this point up, and I feel like we should probably, you saw Ben Shapiro's video?
Yeah, I also saw another guy named the Progressive Voice respond to the exact same video, and I think I'm going to make like one single response video to respond to both videos, basically, because there was a lot of points, I won't say a lot of points, but there are a few points that really I agreed with both you and even Progressive Voice on, or at least one point that.
Oh, you saw my response to
Ben Shapiro. I saw both your response to him and the Progressive Voice. Do not know if you guys have ever heard of him, but
I've heard of the Progressive Voice. Yeah, I've heard of him.
Chubby little grumpy hobbit-looking guy.
He sounds like a faggot, to be honest. But yeah, so would you guys like to have another stream on abortion in general, just for another time, if you're cool with that?
I would say you guys don't mind. We can have that be the topic for next Thursday. I'm definitely heading in that, and there is a lot more to say about that particular topic.
Yeah, because you brought that up, and I'm thinking, oh boy, that I think we're going to definitely spur on that. But all right, so I'm going to schedule that stream for another time. It's the 19th. Oh yeah, it's the 19th, and
And I think I'm going to
The 26th.
leave this stream right now because I'm really pushing the limit right now on my sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
All right,
that's
man.
where we're gonna wrap this
have
up.
a good night. Yeah.
Yeah. This is where we're gonna wrap this up, everybody. This was a nice stream, very thought provoking. That was Humane Mind,
Hang
Son
on
of
a
Lucifer.
second. So
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Go for
it's
Sunday, what time for me versus Cult of Ham?
If you want to, are you cool with it starting at noon Mountain Standard Time?
On Sunday? Mountain Standard Time is okay. So that's 11 my time. All right, that should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you got any other concerns, you can let me know through the DM.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that should be fine with me. Remind me the day before, or check with me to see if that's still that. It's a little on the early side, so we might need to push it back by an hour or two, but that should be fine as of right now.
Yeah. All right, everyone, that's where I'm going to end this. I do recommend you guys go check out Son of Lucifer, Zach Edwards, and Humane Mind. They're in my S-Man Recommend section. And as always,
JJ likes
JJ
boys.
likes trannies.
Come on,
and trannies.
JJ isn't here, man. Say something about somebody else in the chat.
Oh,
like
all right,
tell
Zach
people
Edwards
about how
likes trans.
I bring homeless people back and I make them watch me shower.
Zach Edwards, everybody, likes masculine women, like Triology.
Oh.